Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a perspective from our source material that really flips the script on how many people approach sacred texts, asking a huge question. What is a holy book actually for?
Okay, let's jump right in with this pretty powerful analogy. It just perfectly sets up the central argument, doesn't it? The idea is, if you treat a sacred text like a science manual, you're not only missing the point, you're asking it to do something it was never designed for. So, what is its true purpose then?
Well, the source kicks things off by drawing a really crucial line in the sand. It makes a distinction between a book of information and what it calls a book of consciousness. And trust me, these are two totally different things with completely different goals. And this is where you really see that shift in thinking, right? From this point of view, a text like the Quran isn't supposed to be a textbook for science or history. Its purpose isn't to make you knowledgeable with a bunch of facts, but to make you wise, to act as a guidebook for fostering a deeper awareness of yourself and the world. You've probably heard this one before, but the source uses this classic metaphor to really drive the point home. The text isn't the reality itself. It's just a signpost. It's a finger pointing you towards nature, towards the universe, towards history, and urging you to go look at those things for yourself. The whole point is to look where it's pointing, not just get obsessed with the finger. Okay, so if it's not a history book, what about all those stories? You know, the ones that sound an awful lot like historical accounts? Well, that brings us to our second point. The perspective here is that their purpose is something else entirely. The source tackles this question head on. It suggests that if you get bogged down in trying to prove every little detail happened exactly as written, you're missing the entire reason the story is being told in the first place. This slide really breaks down that fundamental shift. The important question isn't, hey, did this really happen word for word? Instead, the real question is, okay, what does the story teach me about my own life, my own choices, my own character? The goal isn't historical accuracy, it's personal insight. And this is a perfect example of that idea in action. The source points to the story of Adam and Iblis. It shows up multiple times in the Quran, but each time the focus is a little different. So are those contradictions? The argument here is absolutely not. Think of them as different camera angles on the same moral drama, each one highlighting a different truth for a different situation. Okay, so once you start reading this way, it leads to a pretty huge challenge to another major pillar of traditional belief, this idea that we have to uncritically follow what our ancestors did and believed. The source has a name for this, the ancestor cult, and it's basically this idea of blindly following tradition just because it's tradition. The argument is that this kind of thinking can actually corrupt the core message of the faith itself. And I love this quote. It frames the idea perfectly. It's arguing that true loyalty isn't about perfectly preserving the past, like you're worshiping cold dead ashes. It's about keeping the fire alive, taking those glowing embers, the core principles, and carrying them forward with you into the present. And here's the kicker. The source points out that the very foundation of this faith is built on people who had to do exactly that. To follow the new path, the first believers had to make a radical break from the path of their fathers. All right, so if faith isn't about blindly following tradition, then what does it actually mean to be a devout or pious person? Well, the source offers a pretty radical redefinition that moves the focus from the outside to the inside. So first, let's look at the conventional view. You know, when we think of piety or taqwa, we often think of things you can see on the outside, the way someone dresses, the rituals they perform, their public displays of worship. But the source draws this sharp contrast with a totally different internal definition. Here, taqwa has nothing to do with what you look like. It's all about a deep, profound sense of moral responsibility. It's about your accountability to yourself, to your community, and to the planet. It's a matter of conscience, not appearance. And this leads to a really powerful litmus test. The source basically says, if your religious practice, your dindarluk, makes you arrogant, if it makes you feel superior to other people, then you're on the wrong path entirely. True piety is supposed to lead to humility, not arrogance. So let's tie all of this together. When you start to see the text as a book of consciousness and piety as an internal moral responsibility, the core idea of monotheism transforms into something much more than a belief system. It becomes a radical social and even political statement. The source uses this verse to make a really interesting point. It suggests that some people get really uncomfortable with the idea of a direct connection to God, with no one in between. The concept of God without any intermediaries, for some, that's a pretty unsettling idea.
And the logic laid out here is so simple, but it's also revolutionary. Step 1. True monotheism, or tawhid, means you worship God alone. Simple enough. Step 2. But if you worship God alone, that means you reject being a servant to any human being. And step 3, if you reject all human masters, well, that's the ultimate declaration of freedom.
And this just sums it all up perfectly. From this perspective, saying there is no God but God is just another way of saying there is no master but God. It becomes the ultimate anti-authoritarian statement.
Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought to chew on. It forces us to ask ourselves, why are we even reading these texts in the first place? Is it to excavate the past, or is it to understand ourselves right here, right now? Because according to this interpretation, that sacred text is a mirror, and its most important job is to show you, you.